Welcome to COS Indiana Live. There's never been a more important time in our history than now if you believe it's time to stand up and be free. Stay tuned and come back every Monday at 7 p.m. as our state director and host, Dale Parrish, present the need for self-governance. Our COS Indiana vision statement is to build a grassroots community of Hoosier citizens and legislators dedicated to the constitutional concept of self-governance. So, take it away, Dale.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Maringo Mike, for that introduction. Yes, my name is Dale Parrish. I am the State Director for Convention of States here in Indiana. I want to welcome you to our broadcast. Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. I certainly did. Yes, it was, ours was much smaller this year than in past years, and I'm sure many of you experienced the same thing. It's just something that we need to do as much as possible. Gonna probably be doing something similar coming up Christmas, but already got that in the works, so we'll probably be doing something similar. I might also mention that our next broadcast, which will be the 14th of December, that will be the final broadcast for 2020. So we'll be taking off the following week, which is Christmas week and New Year's week. So the 14th will be our final broadcast, and then we will be returning again then on January 4th, 2021. I also want to mention, as I have been for some time now, that we are also live streaming the broadcast on our YouTube channel, COS Indiana. So you now have an alternative way to view our broadcast. The broadcast comes to you mainly through our state Facebook page, Convention of States Indiana, but now we have also another alternative where we're live streaming through our YouTube channel, COS Indiana. Just wanted to make you aware of that. Also wanted to make you aware that, you know, after our broadcast is completed, every broadcast, there's a recording of the broadcast that automatically appears on the state Facebook page, Convention of States Indiana. Then I also create or download the recording and post it to our YouTube channel, COS Indiana. And I'm now posting a recording of the broadcast on Parler. And you can follow me on Parler at D.O. Parrish. So I'm hoping in 2021, I'm hoping to expand that Parler presence to include more things. So got some things in the works, some things on my mind that I want to try and develop. So hopefully over the Christmas, New Year's break, we'll formulate some of the thoughts and plans, and that will be one of the things that I hope to expand in 2021. Okay. Let me go through quickly the segments of our broadcast tonight. Our first segment will be the discussion topic. Generally, we have perhaps sometimes a topic that we do a panel discussion on. Other times, though, I try to bring in individuals from our leadership group and introduce you to them, let you know what they do. We have tonight one of our members of our leadership group that you've seen frequently, and it's our the person I call our super volunteer, Debbie Stewart, will be presenting another chapter in constitutional literacy tonight. So we've got Debbie coming up in the first segment. Okay. The second segment will be some information. I'll bring up my PowerPoint, share some information with you about how we're doing here in the state of Indiana and resources that we have available. Then in the third segment, I'll try my best to recognize any viewers that we have tonight. And I see one of the viewers already on. This is I can't wait to get to him. This is one of my high school friends from way back in the day. So I hope to show him a little later on. So thank you, Ken, for joining tonight. I should say thanks, Pooch. His nickname was Pooch. Anyway, I digress. Okay. Then in the final segment this evening, I call it the invitation segment. That's where we'll kind of wrap up the broadcast, let you know what we have planned for the December 14th broadcast, and then finally invite you to join Convention of States here in Indiana. Because our target audience here with this broadcast, we're trying to reach those Hoosiers in the state of Indiana that do not belong to Convention of States. So we want to invite you to join Convention of States here in Indiana. So that's why I call it the invitation segment. All right. Well, without further ado, let me bring on Debbie. I need to unmute her so you can hear her. And then let me bring her on. And I will do that right now. There she is. And we'll get this screen that we want. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Dale.
Oh, good. Boy, you're loud and clear. Whoop. Almost lost you there. All right. Loud and clear. All right, Debbie. Tonight, you're going to talk about due process. So take it away.
Okay, well, before I get started on due process, I heard what Ken's nickname is, but I want to ask Ken what your nickname was.
Well, I do have a nickname, and he knows it, and he'll. Ken, if you want to answer Debbie's question, then go ahead and input that. If you're still viewing tonight, go ahead and input that, and I'll put it up.
We want the entire state of Indiana to know what Dale's nickname was.
We had, like I said, Ken was a high school buddy, and we all had nicknames for each other. So we were big on nicknames. Anyway.
Yes.
Due process, Debbie.
Okay. So due process is, for the layman out there like me, right? It's really the fair process that's due to you when you run into any legal issues. So we call it due process. And in the Fifth Amendment and in the 14th Amendment, there is a clause in each of those that we call the due process clause, where it says a person cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So that's just kind of give you an idea for what we're going to talk about. And then as far as objectives go, we want to understand what due process is. We want to recognize when due process actually due for each one of us. And then we want to also talk about how the protections that the due process clause have for us have expanded by you-know-who again, the Supreme Court. So we have a pattern. Michael Ferris has this pattern flowing through all of these episodes that many times it's the Supreme Court that steps out of their judicial mode into the legislative mode that was never given to them. So
he does do that frequently, doesn't he, throughout the series, and for good reason, because that's what has happened.
Well, if you really are a constitutionalist and you stick to the Constitution, it's very frustrating to see other people who don't. And so there's a reason why they were put in the judicial branch, and then there's a legislative branch over here. So absolutely warranted here, right?
Right. Okay.
So a couple terms, and I'm going to read for due process. It's a little bit lengthy, but it's the idea that all legal proceedings from search to arrest, from imprisonment to trial, will be fair, and the accused will be informed throughout the process and have the opportunity to respond to all charges. So you're really getting a fair process from beginning to end whenever you get in trouble, okay, by the law. So that's what due process is. And a hearing is an opportunity to state your own cause, sometimes done formally, sometimes informally, but normally with due process, it's done formally. So that's what a hearing is. Everybody gets a hearing in due process. And then the Miranda rule, which is also called Miranda rights, the Miranda warning, is the rule requiring police officers to inform the arrested suspects of their rights before they get interrogated, and especially the right to remain silent. So that's required now of our law. So, so we'll talk about all those things in here, but I just want to do that up front.
Okay.
So what is due process, right? We talked a little bit about that. It's the idea that the government must give you a fair hearing before depriving you of life, liberty, and property. And those three things are the key: life, liberty, and property. That's going to define when you get a hearing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The phrase due process, again, comes from the 5th and the 14th Amendment, which says neither the federal government nor the state government shall deprive anyone of life, liberty, or property. All right, so that's the main idea there, which sounds like our founding fathers, right? Because they knew better, coming from England. And they can't do that without due process of law. So they have to go through this whole hearing thing. Due process ensures the government will meet the following standards. So I just kind of summed these up into some general things. First, they need to inform you of your charges. What are you being charged with? Second, they need to show you that you have violated some specific laws or statutes. Third, they must give you a chance to answer the charges against you in a hearing. So you get to respond to that. 4, to show sustained and credible evidence. And 5, if you're found guilty, the government must provide you with some explanation of its findings. So it should be a transparent process, all right? The great deal of variation in how this works in due process is because you could get a parking ticket or you could be charged with murder. And because of the differences of the kind of crime it is, then that the process can look differently. But those are the main things that are going to happen in there.
Okay.
All right, so when is due process due? And this is good. All of us need to know what our rights are, right? The rules of due process invoked only when the government is going to deprive you of your life, liberty, or property. So once again, those 3 elements, if they deprive you of any of those, they have to give you a fair hearing. They have to give you due process. But we're not entitled to due process every time the government makes a decision that affects us that we don't like. So we don't get due process all the time unless it takes away our life, our liberty, or our property. So, you know, for an example, let's say you and your family go to a state park and you decide you're going to camp for 5 days, and you get a campsite there and you're all set to go. Well, on day 3, the president of the United States and his family decide they're going to camp there, so everybody has to, you know, leave. You can't get due process there because it's not your property. You're not using any life issues, not any liberty issues, so you wouldn't get due process there. So that's just kind of a silly example, but you get the point.
Okay.
Okay, so again, life, liberty, or property. Okay, but let's moving into the Supreme Court and how they've tried to expand these rulings. So the protections that we have had with due process have been good protections, but the Supreme Court has expanded those. A couple areas. One is Board of Regents versus Roth. The Supreme Court ruled that government employees, you can't fire a government employee without a hearing. And that hearing is to determine whether there's sufficient grounds for discharge. So that was something the Supreme Court decided. They kind of legislated that on their own.
Which makes it so difficult to fire federal employees. It makes it very, very difficult. So,
we could do a whole nother 10-minute segment on that one, couldn't we?
we could, yes, we
And
could.
we're reaping the benefit. We're reaping the, I shouldn't say the benefits, but we're reaping some of the things that go with that, because for all these years, you know, people get to stay in government whether they're doing a good job or not. So
Right.
And a really big landmark case was Goldberg versus Kelly, where the Supreme Court ruled that a person on welfare now has the right to a hearing before you can terminate their welfare benefits. So the hearing would then find out, are they still eligible for the benefits? And this landmark case really led to the whole entitlement thing in our society, because welfare was a privilege, but now people see it as a right. I'm entitled to this, I'm entitled to that. And then a third area where the Supreme Court expanded is with actually public school attendance. So they made the decision that if you're expelled or suspended from school for 10 days or more, you have to get a hearing. You're due with a hearing. And so some of these rules are not necessarily bad rules, like the one about suspending from school. That might be a good thing. The issue is not the rule, it's how they came about it. They did not let the legislative branch work on this. The Supreme Court was the one that made up these rules out of thin air.
Right.
So they're not constitutionally based at all. So the Supreme Court for the I say the nteenth time, is that a phrase? Has moved on. What is it?
Nth time.
Okay.
I think.
So they have moved out of their judicial mode into legislative mode again.
Right.
All right. So that brings us to the last topic, which is Miranda rights, which is Miranda warnings. And for kind of the original tenet of the Miranda rights from the founding fathers was for hundreds of years of English and American law, any confession resulting from coercion, which is either force or threat, was a violation of the due process law. Okay, that was kind of what the founding fathers had in mind there. But in the case named Miranda versus Arizona, the Supreme Court changed the meaning of due process regarding the interrogation of a person who's in custody. So before this case, due process and interrogation was about preventing coercion. You couldn't threaten them or force them, right? But after this case, the due process now requires the police to educate the suspects of their rights.
When was this case, Debbie? Do you have a date on this?
You know what? I do. Let me just look real quick. I'm sorry, I didn't write the date down on that. But it's right here.
Fairly recent, it seems to me.
You know what? I don't even have a date in here.
Okay, all right.
Sorry about that. I can look it up though.
That's okay. That's okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So, let me find where I was here. Okay. So, that's not necessarily a bad thing that we educate people about their rights. Again, it's not necessarily a bad idea, but the courts made that rule up again out of thin air. So, I mean, really in conclusion, we're talking about now, there is an exception where the courts can legislate, and that's when they're legislating for the rules that they have in the conduct of their own trials. That makes sense.
Right.
And that's still subject to the legislative branch, but they can come up with those and legislate those, and then the legislative branch checks those. But really, in conclusion of this whole thing, due process is a wonderful right we have. It's really, really amazing that we always get a fair trial, we get treated fairly, but the Supreme Court has went way out of their box again in doing these things and legislating from the bench.
Okay.
So.
All right. Very good, very good. Now, Debbie, you're coming back. I have you scheduled to come back on January 25th.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be talking about, I believe you told me, property rights.
Yes, so the plan is property rights, but as you and I talk, we're going to kind of see what goes on over the next month, and there may be something that's a little bit more culturally on time to talk about as opposed to that, but if not, we'll do property rights.
What Debbie's referring to is we're trying to use one of her terms. We're trying to enrich the broadcast for 2021. In other words, finding some ways to expand it, make it more interesting. Always trying to do that, as a matter of fact. And so I would like Debbie to play a bigger role in the broadcast coming up in 2021. So I think you're going to see more of Debbie. We haven't figured it out yet. We're still trying to figure out what role she's going to play, or what that expanded role is going to look like. So, but right now we have her scheduled for January 25th, and we'll see what she'll be doing then. Whether will it be strictly on property rights, or will we have an expanded role? Now, I hate to do this, but
yep.
Pooch came
Pink.
through. So that was my nickname, Pink.
All right, now you got to tell us why.
No.
Well,
No.
maybe next show.
That's for another show. That's for
Okay.
another show.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ken.
Oh, I'll tell you, good times, good times. Ken lives in Colorado, as a matter
Oh,
of fact,
nice.
and so I stay in contact with him frequently, and we Ken's a good conservative, so we have a lot of things to talk about. But
We need those in Colorado.
grew up with Ken ever since grade school, so
Wow.
long time ago. So thank you, Ken, for attending tonight. And Debbie, thank you for being with us, and thank you for everything you've done this year. We're, like I said, looking forward to you having an expanded role in 2021, whatever that might look like once we figure it all out.
That sounds great. Me too.
All right. Thanks, Debbie.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Debbie Stewart. Yes. Great. I call her the super volunteer, and she is a great volunteer. We need more like her. We need more like her, folks. All right, let me get into my PowerPoint presentation here, and I'm going to go kind of quickly on this since we went a little over time with Debbie. So let me bring up the slideshow option so that you can get a full view of the slideshow. So our vision statement now in Indiana is our national vision statement, and that's to build a strong, engaged army of self-governing activists. Now, in Indiana, our mission statement, which if we accomplish, will bring us closer to realizing that vision statement. So our Indiana mission statement for 2021 is going to be to restore self-governance by recruiting, training, and deploying citizen activists to engage in all levels of government. So that's the mission here in Indiana. We have a number of resources available to us here in Indiana. The main resource is our national website, conventionofstates.com. You'll hear us from time to time make reference to this website. We use it frequently. Now, embedded in that national website is our state website page, conventionofstates.com/Indiana. Social media, Facebook. We're on our state Facebook page, Convention of States Indiana, is where this broadcast comes to you. So we're very much on Facebook, state Facebook page, Convention of States Indiana. YouTube channel, you heard me mention that earlier. Our YouTube channel, COS Indiana, we're also live streaming the broadcast on our YouTube channel. But that YouTube channel is also an educational resource for us here in the state. We have some narrated PowerPoints on there. We have recordings of our broadcasts. And we also have links to a podcast that our legislative liaison, Paul Phillips, does. It's called The Free to Be Free. Excellent podcast. So whenever Paul generates a new podcast, we put a link on there so you can access it very easily. It's the Free to Be Free podcast. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and as I mentioned earlier, now on Parler at D.O. Parish. Now, just very quickly, some numbers. In 2019, we surpassed 41,000 supporters here in Indiana. We set as a goal for 2020, 52,000 supporters. And in November, we surpassed the 52,000 mark. So we have set as our goal in 2021 to obtain or to accumulate 70,000 supporters here in the state of Indiana. So we've been growing tremendously, and we want to keep that going. So we want you, if you're not involved, if you're not one of our supporters, we want you to become a supporter. Now, from this supporter group, we have about 80 individuals in one level or another of leadership. And we're always looking for more people willing to take on leadership roles. Now, if you want to get involved to become a supporter or possibly a leader, go to the national website, conventionofstates.com, click on the menu selection, Take Action, scroll down to where it says Become a Leader, take a look at the different positions that we have, and be sure to take note of the estimated time requirement, because some of these require very little time and others require more time. So please take a look at the volunteer positions that we have, and like I said, we would love to have you get involved. Convention of States basics. I'm just going to touch on these very, very briefly. Once again, if you go to conventionofstates.com, that national resource, click on the menu selection Resources, and you can see there's a wealth of information on the basics of Convention of States. But the basics are the problem, the solution, and the plan. We've identified some abuses by our federal government in the problem area. Our solution, of course, is calling for a Convention of States, according to Article 5 of the Constitution, for the purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution that would address those abuses that we've identified in the problem area. And then finally, what's our plan? How are we going to bring this about? So those are, very briefly, the Convention of States basics. All right, let me get back to the screen here where I should be. And when I do this, I always get a little scared because it goes blank. Okay, but here I am back. Now I want to try to recognize some of the viewers this evening. I've already recognized my my high school buddy Ken Anderson, but that's the first comment that he made. He said, wanted to say howdy to me. Like I said, Ken lives in Colorado. Sue Lyon. Sue is with us tonight. Great show. I always enjoy Debbie's constitutional literacy segments. Susan does our state newsletter, does a great job. So we are very, very pleased to have Susan on with us tonight. Now, here is a young lady, Liana. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Liana Crable. And Liana says she's applied to be a district captain, and that is wonderful. Thank you very, very much. She's also asking a question here, and I'm going to go ahead and put it up here. How do you track the number of supporters? Is it the number of COS signatures from Indiana? We have in that national website, Leanna, and you're going to learn about this in your training as a district captain, but in that national website, conventionofstates.com, there is on the back side of that website it's an administrative tool. So we have a database, we have various ways of identifying supporters and keeping track of supporters. So it's from that database that we can generate the numbers so that we know how many supporters we have in the state of Indiana. So you, as I said, you will learn how to access that website and how to use it in the administration of your district. So very, very good question, and welcome aboard, Leanna. Welcome aboard. Thank you very much. All right, let me get now into the final segment this evening, the segment that I call the invitation. And I want to just kind of wrap things up this evening. On our next broadcast on the 14th, which will be the final broadcast of the year, I'm going to have as a guest, I'm going to have Maya Phillips on. Now, some of you, those of you that are involved in Convention of States here in Indiana, know that Maya is a young lady that just graduated from high school. She was what we call the Young Americans for COS state coordinator for us. And she graduated from high school and got accepted to Patrick Henry University, or maybe it's Patrick Henry College, can't remember. So she is now a college student, but she's also now become an intern for convention estates at the national level. So uh, Maya is a really wonderful young lady, going to be a constitutional lawyer. Okay, so we want to touch base with Maya. She is home for the holidays. She came home for Thanksgiving and won't be going back now until after the new year. So we want to bring Maya on and have her get us all caught up with what's all going on in her life. Okay, so should be very interesting. Should be very interesting. So that'll be for our next broadcast on the 14th. Well, I want to wrap things up this evening with you know with everything going on in our country right now, I hope you all are beginning to feel like I am the importance of when we say we the people, because that's what Convention of States is all about. And I hope you're beginning to realize the importance of we the people and the role that we the people need to play in our government. And I'm talking about not only at the federal government, but at the state level, county level, city, local community. We the people, it's important that we play a role in our government. It's part of self-governance. And my goodness, with what's going on in our country today, uh, just as the picture says, who decides? Our president, Mark Meckler, has a famous quote, and that is, it's uh, there's a fundamental question facing our country today, and it's not what we should do. The question is, who decides? And our answer to that is we the people. And if you believe that we the people need to have a greater say so in our government at all levels, then you need to belong to Convention of States. Because folks, calling a Convention of States is the solution. It's a solution as big as the problem. So that's what I wanted to say. I want to wrap things up on that note. We the people, it's becoming more and more important. Um, I've heard a lot of people say, well, what can we do? Everything's in such a chaos. What can we do? Well, calling a convention of states is what we can do, and that's what we're all about. So we would love to have you be involved. So go to that national website, conventionofstates.com, and get involved. That's what you need to do, is get involved. With that, folks, I want to thank you very much for tuning in tonight. Once again, we'll be back next Monday evening, 7 p.m., December 14th, and look forward to seeing you all at that time and sharing the time with you again. So good evening, everyone. Have a great one, and we'll see you. She lost. Now she had no life.